hit the record button. All right. All right, hopefully you can see my screen.
There it goes. Yep.
Very good. Okay. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining this evening's webinar. My name is Eleanor Rangers. I'm the president of the Southeastern Pennsylvania Cold War Historical Society. We're a nonprofit that's been in existence since 2010 that originally started out collecting oral histories of people that were involved in Cold War related activities in the greater Southeastern Pennsylvania area. We've kind of expanded our remit over the years, and now we are involved with some historical preservation at the old Johnsville Centrifuge in Warminster, Pennsylvania. So if any of you do have interest in ever receiving a tour, just shoot us an email at mail@coldwarhistory.org, and we'd be happy to set something up for you. This is our History in Our Backyard webinar series, which has been in existence since 2012, actually. Just as an FYI, for those of maybe some of the regulars, we are using a new email system to send out announcements. So if you're not getting emails that you previously were receiving, please check your spam folder to see if I wound up in there and allow our emails. I do want to mention, of course, as a nonprofit organization, donations are always welcome. We do operate on a shoestring, but we do always welcome those donations if you so choose. I do want to just give a couple little plugs of, why we do this and actually the support that actually helps us to do these types of activities. And these are a couple recent examples of some interesting outreach that we had received because of our presence on the web. For example, actually, if everyone could mute their lines, that would be helpful. Thank you. We actually were contacted by a gentleman who's working on a new a biography about Scott Carpenter, one of the Mercury astronauts who trained at Johnsville on the centrifuge. And he actually was asking for our assistance in locating some information in centrifuge logs that we have copies of. And this actually was useful for his research that is ongoing. So that was pretty exciting to be able to connect with him. And also another seemingly, random contact that we had received was from a relative from someone who had actually worked at the Naval Air Development Center. Her name was Alice Stoll. She was actually the woman who invented Nomex, fire retardant material, in conjunction with DuPont. And we were actually contacted by a distant relative who was looking for some information because she was writing up an article about her relative for a local historical publication in Ireland. And recently we were also able to get a photograph to her family of Alice's burial plot that's in Montgomery County. So it's always gratifying to know that, when people find us and they're able to reach out to us for, information that we're trying to preserve. So just a demonstration of, what we do and we'll continue to do. Another thing that donations are helping to produce is a display room that we are in the process of developing that will be at the Fuge, or the old Johnsville Centrifuge. And it's a small display room right off the entrance that will be dedicated to the history of the Naval Air Development Center. So we are in process of putting that together. We've actually had some donations already, including we'll be displaying a P3 video that we had involvement in helping to produce content for. So we're pretty excited about that. And a number of other artifacts, general information regarding the Naval Air Development Center. So once that's completed, we'll get some announcements out so folks can get over there to see that as well. I briefly did mention that we do record these webinars and we do put them on our YouTube channel following our events. We do have a growing collection of those on our YouTube channel, as well as other information, Cold War related information that we do put up there as well. So would encourage you to check out our YouTube site. We also do have some selected highlights of oral history interviews that we've conducted over the years as well that may be of interest. So again, just want to mention that. We also have a Facebook page. If any of you are on that social media platform, it's another easy way to keep in touch with us. So would encourage you to check us out. Please note that it's not Southeastern Pennsylvania, it's Southeastern PA Cold War Historical Society that we're known as on Facebook. Also want to mention at the Fuge, the old Johnsville Centrifuge, which has been converted to an event center, actually a quite successful event center, they also recently opened up a brew pub, and the brew pub is celebrating its first year anniversary coming up April 23rd. So if you're in the area, you might want to go ahead and stop by and, you know, have a brew, and they also offer tours on Sundays of the centrifuge. So just want to mention that to you as well. And also coming up May 13th at 11 a.m., we had started before the pandemic, we had started to do movies, Cold War movies, along with discussants. The first event we had was Bridge of Spies, and we had Gary Powers Jr. come to speak. And then with the pandemic, we put everything on hold. So we are reluctantly dipping our toe back in the water with a live event. And we are aiming to screen Searching for Skylab. This year is the 50th anniversary of the Skylab missions. And this is a documentary that was produced a couple of years ago by a gentleman who is in Germany. He's actually Australian by birth. And he actually has produced a wonderful, wonderful tribute to Skylab. So we're hoping to air that on the 13th and include a post-viewing Q&A by Facebook. We will pump him in from Germany to our viewing room, and there may be another few surprises there along with that. So if you are interested, we are sending information out periodically through email, where you can shoot us an email to get more information. Tickets are $10, and we are actually splitting the proceeds with the filmmaker. So so hopefully you can make it on May 13th. I do request if everyone could kindly mute your microphones and turn off your cameras just to preserve bandwidth for the presentation this evening. That would be wonderful. For those of you new to our History in Our Backyard webinar, we do have monthly webinars and occasionally live programming that occurs at the Fuge. This is a list of the upcoming programs that we have going on this year. You can see April 13th there, Project SPARC. Next month, we have a presentation on Naval Tactical Airborne Electronic Warfare Countermeasures. Definitely looking forward to that. And you can see the other programs throughout the year. We do, if you are on our email distribution list, you can you'll see announcements come out about these subsequent programs as they take place. And this is, as I mentioned, next month's program. And there we are, up to the highlight of this evening, Project SPARC, launching students to STEM careers. And I'm going to introduce our speaker and moderator this evening about Project SPARC, Bert Dicht, who is the director of the Northeast High School Project SPARC Boosters. He himself was a SPARC astronaut and part of the Northeast High School class of 1977. So let me also provide a little more background about Bert. Bert manages the National Space Society office at Kennedy Space Center in Florida. He retired from the position of Director of Student and Academic Education Programs for the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers in October 2022. In this capacity, Dicht was responsible for the development and implementation of educational programs for engineering faculty, university students, and pre-university educators and students. Dicht began his career in the aerospace industry at Northrop Grumman in 1982, and during his aerospace career, he made important design contributions on multiple aircraft, including the F-5EF, F-20A, YF-23A, and F-18EF projects. He also worked for Rockwell's Space Transportation Systems Division and interned at the Kennedy Space Center while in college. Dicht also served as an exhibit explainer for the Intrepid Sea Air Space Museum in New York City, and is currently serving as major and aerospace education officer for the New York Wing and the Phoenix Composite Squadron of the Civil Air Patrol. In 2014, Dick led the creation of the Northeast High School Project SPARC boosters and currently serves as the director, as we mentioned. Bert received his bachelor's in mechanical engineering from Temple University and a master's in history from California State University, Northridge. Dick has authored several articles on aerospace history and is a frequent guest speaker on aviation and space topics. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Bert Dick. So welcome, and I'm very excited to hear about Project SPARC this evening.
Okay, we'll get this going. Okay, and hopefully everyone can see my screen now.
Yes.
So I'm starting off here with a movie that I really enjoyed back in 1995. It's called Mr. Holland's Opus, and it starred Richard Dreyfuss as Glenn Holland. He was a talented musician who dreamed of riches and fame, but as we know, dreams don't always turn into reality, and he ended up becoming a music teacher to pay the bills. And at first, he really wasn't very good at it, but then something clicked, and he was able to truly connect with students. And the movie has a really important message about the ability of teachers to inspire their students. So here is Mr. Holland with one of his students, played by Alicia Witt. And during his career, he's influenced many students, but in the end, he really doesn't feel that life was satisfactory. And as he's retired, he ends up going into the auditorium that is filled with thousands of his former students cheering him on. And Alicia Witt, who again said was the student, she played Gertrude Lang, but going to be a spoiler alert here. She comes back as the governor of the state and tells Mr. Holland to look around you. There's not a life in this room that you have not touched, and each of us is a better person because of you. And it truly was a powerful statement to me that teachers have a superpower. And I showed Krista McCullough here because she said, "I touch the future, I teach." And just like Mr. Holland, there is another teacher who was able to touch the future. And this presentation is dedicated to him, Dr. Robert A.G. Montgomery Jr., who is SPARC's founder. He was a physics teacher there at Northeast High School and created SPARC. And a lot of SPARC alumni are here with us this evening. And it had a profound effect on all of us. So he truly touched the future, and we'll talk more about that as I move through the presentation. So I want to give some background. I know we've got a number of people who know all this already, but I'd like to do just a quick introduction. So Project SPARC, back then, it was called the Space Research Capsule. So the acronym meant Space Research Capsule because that truly was the focus to build a capsule. Today, it's called the Space Research Center because it's more encompassing of all the aspects of STEM. So it's still Project SPARC, but just a little different meaning in terms of the acronym. So what is it? It's an after-school program, a preeminent, I'll call it STEM program, science, technology, engineering, and math education program, and is also connected to the medicine and engineering and aerospace magnet school at Northeast High School. And it began in the early 60s. I'll be talking more about that. But it really truly provides the practical hands-on experience for students in a lot of different fields of interest. And it's truly about inspiring and developing the next generation of STEM innovators and professionals. So it's been around for more than 60 years. And as I like to say, it was STEM before the term even existed. For those of you not familiar with Northeast Philly, it's a big portion of the Philadelphia area that's bounded by the Delaware River, Bucks County, and Montgomery County. Based on census data, the population is around 300 to 450,000 people, but it depends on the boundaries that you choose. It was a great place to grow up. Today, it's made up of many, many diverse neighborhoods that are reflected in Northeast High School as well. So a really great area. Northeast High School itself is located at 1601 Cottman Avenue, Cottman and Algon Avenues. This is actually the second Northeast High School. There was one before this at 8th and Lehigh. The present location was started in the late 50s. It's grades 9 through 12. About 3,500 students are there. And as I said about diversity, more than 50 languages are spoken. But it's a great school. The largest number of students graduating from Philadelphia's comprehensive high schools come from Northeast High School. And those that move on to college, they have the highest rate of graduation from four-year colleges from Philadelphia's comprehensive high schools. So it was a great place to go to school, and it's still a great place for students. So let's go back and talk a little bit about SPARC now, how it began. And we do have a couple of people on today who were part of that beginning. But let me put things into context, what 1962 was like for everybody. So John Glenn became the first American to orbit the Earth in February. So America's space program was just moving. Again, the Kennedy's goal of going to the moon was set in 1961. But the 60s were a turbulent time as well. James Meredith became the first Black student to attend Ole Miss back in February that year, and in the emerging civil rights movement. Then in September, John F. Kennedy gave an amazing speech. If you've never read it or heard it, I encourage you, at Rice University. It wasn't just about the space program, it was about technology and its impact. But there he said those amazing words about, we choose to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it is hard. So that had a profound effect. Also some fun, the Jetsons, because we're keeping a space theme, premiered on ABC, first color program on ABC in September. And of course, we were also on the brink. We're talking about the Cold War, the Cuban Missile Crisis in October of 1962. So a turbulent time. And someone had mentioned beforehand when we started about the impact of Sputnik on education. And I wrote a paper in the issue of Ad Astra magazine in May 2019. It was called Caught Between the Moon and STEM Career. And it talked about the impact the space program had on education in the United States. We felt we were behind the Soviets, and NASA was created, and there was massive government investment in education and research that helped spur the creation of the STEM workforce that made Apollo possible and created people like me of the Apollo generation who also went on to STEM careers. So SPARC, it starts to take shape. Mr. Montgomery at the time then recognized the Emergent Space Program offered great opportunities to inspire and prepare students for careers in technology and science. And he conceived the idea for Project SPARC as an after-school program, a space club, to attract interested students. The program was launched in November 1962 with a very modest budget of about $200. That's around $2,000 in today's dollars. And the call went out for interested students, and wow, the response was overwhelming. More than 150 students applied for the program before it even got off the ground. The SPARC mantra was 2 rules. Never discard any ideas. And most importantly, this is the second one, the group's adult technical advisors are not permitted to suggest new ideas. Everything must come from the students. And that mantra has continued through SPARC throughout its 60+ years and continues today, that it's student-led, student-developed. The students run the program, a very, very important aspect of the program. As the program started to get started, one thing, I read some interesting background material that the idea for a space capsule actually came from the students themselves. And there was initially some laughter about the idea of building a capsule, but after a while, everyone seemed to say that is a great idea. The initial program goals were to investigate problems of living in space, creating a capsule simulator that will be built to test and study methods of handling space problems and living in space. Students themselves would train as astronauts, operate the capsule, and also students would operate the ground control system as well. And the test flights would be under different conditions for a final circumlunar flight, and simulating the movements, the communication, the data recording of the US Apollo program. They decided to build what was called the System Evaluation Facility. This was done behind the school auditorium there at Northeast High School. The first students were actually selected in November, and their initial jobs were doing research and starting planning out the program. By January, the plans for the design and construction of this system evaluation facility started meshing into place. And you can see the picture there is actually a model of what they were conceiving. And you see on the far right, the space capsule. The idea was to get that first flight going within about 15 to 18 months after the go-ahead. So they were operating like a true space program in getting things started, planning, designing, developing, and then launching the program. I did also read a number of things related to people questioning why the investment in something like SPARC. And Mr. Montgomery at the time responded with a couple of answers here. Number one, it was to help students discover how to handle problems of real research on a high school level. As you know, research is not done in high school, not even done as undergraduates. You usually do research on the graduate level, but the idea is students to start understanding the scientific method, observation and measurement and definitions to hypothesis, and the engineering design process, meaning you conceive, design, test, evaluate, and then redesign. All those things are important in real life. It also offered students opportunities to explore any field of science, from astronomy to electronics to chemistry and medicine. But a really important one that I never even thought about, students gained a lot of experience in learning to sell a project, to create public awareness, because again, they were the ones selling this. And students got experience with real life practical applications and working under pressure. I can tell you from my own experience, we felt like this was a real space program and people's lives were on the line. In terms of the SPARC teams, there was a flight plan team, a medical, a psychology team, a capsule communications team they called Astronautics, a design engineering team, life support, and they created an advanced projects team to look to the future. And I pulled this photograph out of one of the newspaper clippings because it was important. Out of the 64 members in 1963 of SPARC, 13 of them were girls, and that was an important aspect here. There weren't any girls who would become astronauts right away, but girls were an important part of the SPARC program. In the first few years, anywhere from 50 to 75 students were involved, but there were students from other areas of the high school who also participated. It's sometimes more than 100 students, like the shop students, for example, helped participate and build and construct some of these materials and some of their facilities. So it was a really all-encompassing program that involved a lot of the school. Well, the students in SPARC were making great progress in getting ready to get a launch. And this is in June '63, about 6 months after the program started. And they wanted to introduce SPARC to the rest of the school. So they introduced the program. You can see some of the technology they had there, including one of the control panels, one of the Mercury spacesuits that they had, and they introduced the astronauts, all juniors, by the way, and that was on purpose, so they can make sure that the juniors would have an opportunity to fly on those first missions the following year when they would get ready to launch. So that's a list of the astronauts, and we have a couple of those original astronauts who are on the call tonight, so maybe we can get some comments from them as well. NASA also got attracted to what was going on with SPARC. You see here a picture of NASA's Director of Speaker Services meeting with Mr. Montgomery there, and it ultimately led to NASA inviting the Northeast High astronauts and other members of SPARC to a visit to NASA's facilities in the United States. And this was a really big trip. 18 students went on a 4,000-mile tour of NASA centers back in '63, and one of our alumni talked about the fact they were studying calculus on the NASA bus as they traveled, and this got a lot of attention, not just in Philadelphia, but also in Houston. You can see the Houston Chronicle here actually talked about the students visiting the Manned Spacecraft Center, learning about ideas. I saw that they actually wrote up gantries on the launch pads, got to meet with astronauts. A really exciting trip. And they used a Trailways bus. This is the picture of all the students as they were ready to make that trip. So a really exciting aspect of SPARC, that the impact it was having, and that at the same time, NASA recognized SPARC as an official high school space program at the time. Well, they were moving forward to develop the capsule and get that first flight ready. So it occurred in May 1964. It was just a 24-hour flight, but there were 3 astronauts on board, and a big treat also. Eleanor mentioned Scott Carpenter earlier. He actually visited SPARC and met with the student astronauts before they launched. And you can see the Philadelphia Daily News, a clipping there that the student trio is A-OK in orbit. A very successful flight. Arthur Tyle Hewitt, in his response back to me, said that why this was the first public flight. They actually did some test flights in private before this, just to make sure everything was working. But this was the first official flight for SPARC back in May 1964. And through the 60s, they moved forward with many different flights. You can see this is high-tech stuff. You can see the control areas. They're monitoring the astronauts with video. They're doing medical exams. They had multiple flights, some are duration of 3 days, some up to 5 days of the astronauts inside that capsule. And one thing I'll have to ask about too when we talk and get into the questions, I understand on that first flight, the astronauts kept their spacesuits on. At least that was what was in one of the paper articles about it. And that was a little different than when I took my flight back in 1977. This was a picture that was just shared with me today on another tour we mentioned the Johnsville Naval Air Development Station. So the SPARC students went there to visit that as well, as later 1969 or 1970. And I also point out another tour that that SPARC took to NASA back in 1967, November. And this, of course, is after the accident of Apollo 1. They went to Goddard, they went to Marshall, they went to Stennis, the Johnson Space Center at the time, the Kennedy Space Center. And I found this picture here. And this looks like Pete Conrad. And you see this guy standing behind there. And that is my brother, Jerry, who was in SPARC, because I sent this picture to him. And he said, "Who is that skinny guy?" And so I think all of us look back at high school pictures like that. But a great picture. Again, they did some amazing things. And of course, Pete Conrad is from Philadelphia. It was from Philadelphia originally. So probably one of the reasons they had a chance to meet with him, the third man to walk on the moon. So SPARC starts to expand 1968 to 1970, outgrowing its facility behind the auditorium, and they actually built a SPARC wing right next to the school itself. And this also housed what we call the Aerospace Education Magnet School at the time. That's separate from SPARC. SPARC was after school. The Magnet School was something to students from anywhere in the city could enroll to get an aerospace type of education. So one of the things they were doing with they were actually going to be creating a true Apollo capsule simulator. This was a pressure vessel, and it was 3-axis motion, had all instrumentation, environmental control system. It was going to be a very elaborate spacecraft. Nowhere else except NASA would have had anything like this at the time. But SPARC, we have a problem. Plans called for that fully functioning spacecraft. I actually have a copy of the one of the proposals here, the specifications of the design systems for it. But what happened with this, a lot of different problems. The contractor, which was CGS Scientific, had financial issues itself. There were funding issues. There were safety issues. The capsule was never completed. And of course, what happens after that, there are lawsuits involved. And Mr. Montgomery's daughter actually sent me some materials after he passed away. And I've got a lot of documentation from the lawyers going back and forth. I'll have to have my brother Steve look at that because, as an engineer, I wasn't sure I understood everything they were talking about, but it was very involved in terms of the lawsuit. But what happened is it actually prevented SPARC from doing more flights for a while. But I will say later that future students made very innovative use of the capsule as they started doing their own programs. This is what the SPARC wing looked like, the control room. You could tell how well equipped it was for the 1970s. The SPARC wing also had offices, a classroom, a laboratory classroom, a fully equipped medical suite, the capsule itself, and the control room. And for me, it was a great place to go to school, actually, in that SPARC wing. So what did they do in the early 70s without a flight, without a capsule? Well, they were checking out the control room. They were doing work on flight planning, but of course, there were no flights. So they spent a lot of time on medical research, working with the tilt table, which I'll talk more about. But they did some really specific tests called cardiac deconditioning and recovery. This is where the astronauts who volunteered would be 10 days in bed, complete bed rest. They weren't even allowed to sit up. And this was to observe the conditioning and what happens to the human body, because again, in space with microgravity, what's the impact there? And after the 10 days, they would get them onto the tilt table to slowly get them recovering. This was done in cooperation with Jeans Hospital at the time and doctors and so on. But they also did sensory deprivation tests as well. One of my friends who is an astronaut actually agreed to go around and have a blindfold on to show what it was like to be visually impaired over a course of several days. So all of these studies are designed to help us learn more about the impact on the human body. So we're moving along in SPARC, and the plans are going to let's get back to flights. There we go. So in the mid to late 70s, we're working to get back to space. The medical teams were very involved. They did first aid and CPR training, disaster drills, medical testing, and flight monitoring. The flight teams were working on pre-flight planning, flight plan development, and also the flight monitoring. Engineering, after we got a house trailer, and we ended up designing, constructing an Apollo capsule simulator, much like they designed in the back of the auditorium in that trailer. So we had to rewire the control room, the connections to the capsule, and worry about the flight monitoring. And for the astronauts, a lot of systems training, understanding all the systems of the spacecraft, working with all the different the groups. We did medical tests and physical fitness. So my own experiences, I started out in SPARC in medical and really enjoyed it. I was thinking of a medical career. As I was entering my senior year, they asked me to become an astronaut or apply. I had to apply, no guarantee I would be accepted because they needed an additional senior astronaut. So I said, sure, I would love to do that. So I ended up applying for the astronaut program and was accepted. And I actually took a number of rides on this tilt table, and I thought it was a heck of a lot of fun. But before I did that in medical, I was one of the medical staff that was monitoring the astronauts who were on the tilt table. But all this led to the planning of the first flight, which was Flight 27 back in April of 1977. It was a 24.5-hour flight. We did 16 orbits. These are some photographs of my fellow astronauts. So Bruce Burkhoff was the command pilot, Robin Weber was the pilot. Of course, I was the engineer. And by the way, Bruce and Rob both became engineers just like me afterward. But our objectives were to test out the Apollo capsule, work with the medical group so they can monitor us. We were hooked up to a lot of different sensors, verify our video and audio communications. And we had a lot of experiments to conduct while we were in the capsule. So it was a really amazing experience. And also had a little fun with SPARC. You know, every crew that flies into space needs to have a patch. So I actually did a concept for the patch in the office, and we had nicknamed our spacecraft Excalibur. And I thought it was a great design, and I was going to share a friend of mine. She was a fabulous artist. She was going to actually turn this into a good design that we could turn into a true patch. But Mr. Montgomery said there was no budget for the patch. So all I have is this sketch I did. Then I also did a sketch of our instrument panel. Now, as an engineer, I'm kind of embarrassed by this. I didn't know much about engineering drawings at the time. My mother, in our basement, we had a mimeograph machine, so I was able to draw this up and reprint it so I could give it to the other astronauts, so we could learn the different systems in the capsule. Because we had to really be familiar with it. And you see, I've got lines crisscrossing. It's as an engineer, kind of embarrassing that I did that, but it was a big help to everybody at the time because we were studying the instrument panel in the control room at the time. Also, this you see, I've got a couple pages from our flight plan sample here, and I let you know that at 1:21 is when we hit max Q. Everything was prescribed for us when we hit switches, when we slept, when we ate, when we did the tests and so on. We did experiments, we did cognitive testing as well, and today astronaut memorabilia is very in demand. We actually all signed our official picture, and Mr. Montgomery signed it, so I can entertain offers for that if people might be interested, but I saved it. I don't know if my fellow astronauts saved it or not. And there were two other flights that came after that, flight 28 and 29, initially right after that. Bob Geiger, who was actually he was the student director of SPARC, but also an astronaut. Hanif Mary, Evan Kessler was the engineer. I know this is not a good picture. This came from a newspaper, but that's me. I was the red team test director for flight 28. So again, who does that in high school? It was just an incredible experience to go through. So I don't have a lot of great information about the 80s to the 2000s, but the SPARC at the time, Mr. Montgomery left SPARC in 1982, and again, dedicated people took over. The students actually constructed several space shuttle simulators, and in this case, they dedicated one of their flights to the Challenger, after Challenger, of course, was in January 1986. You can see some of the work they're doing with the control room. One of the astronauts at the controls of the space shuttle here, students monitoring the flights. This one, I love this picture because it's kind of reminiscent about how the astronauts leave the operations and control building here at the Kennedy Space Center when they're ready to go to the launch pad. So the astronauts walking down the hallway, getting ready for their flights. So this is about 1989. They also did a simulated flight where they actually hooked up with the Soviets in a combined mission. So they were doing some really innovative things as SPARC continued. And this one, I just want to get a kind of a circle back. In 1998, SPARC students developed an experience to assess how worms reacted to the microgravity of space. And the students worked with Instrumentation Technology Associates to develop the experiment, which flew on STS-95 Discovery. That was actually John Glenn's flight. And the students were able to go to the Kennedy Space Center to view the launch. And it's great, our SPARC co-director, Andrew Adams, was one of those students who participated in that. He wrote a report afterward. Most of the worms had died, and they even had some control set of worms that they kept on Earth. So they really didn't learn much about it, about the impact. But it was still, think about that. Students had an experiment on the space shuttle, and that comes right back to SPARC with our co-director, Andrew Adams. These are what the facilities looked like in the late 90s, 2000s. You had the capsule. The medical rooms were converted into robotic workshops. And you can see they're doing 3D printing here. This is the Space Shuttle Viking, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second as we talk about the future of SPARC. And here you see a better picture of the Viking space shuttle and the control panels as all the students were monitoring all these flights. So what happened? If things are going along with SPARC, students are being impacted, students are being inspired, and then all of a sudden, December 2013, the budget cuts from the Philadelphia School District were announced. And it didn't just impact SPARC, it impacted any non-sports activity that was done after school. All those things were cut. And I tell you, the students were very adept at social media. They were very smart. They got the word out that these budget cuts were killing a program that existed for more than 50 years and inspired so many students to get into STEM and professional careers. I heard about it first from a good friend of mine, Lonnie Goldiner, and a number of us from the class of, this is the class of 1977, we were trying to figure out what to do. And the school was closed. We couldn't contact anybody, but we made a decision to actually start a GoFundMe page. And another friend, Mark Wittenstein, another friend, Art Levy, we launched this on our own. And this was on December 24th. And we just couldn't believe the response that we were getting from a lot of SPARC alumni, from parents, from friends of SPARC, from teachers. The response was overwhelming. I had a modest goal, I think, of $4,000. We passed that really fast and ended up, before we switched over, to have raised almost $14,000 in a very, very short time. So we weren't able to connect with the students and the teachers until after the school started again after the holidays. But this again made big news in Philadelphia newspapers. So this is a reprint of one of the articles in, like, for example, the Northeast Times. We were interviewed by the Inquirer. We were interviewed by the local TV news stations about what was going on, about the fundraiser. We initially turned over about $11,000. I think when we finally got everything turned over from the GoFundMe, it was closer to about $16,000. And it helped save the program. And I really give credit to the students here. These are some of the seniors from that year who, they didn't complain about things, they acted. It was a real sense of leadership to help save the program. And it was an exciting time. And one of the things we were clear about, we saw that there was not going to be any money for the foreseeable future. And we had to ensure that SPARC had some funding long-term. So we formed what was called the Northeast High School Project SPARC Boosters. The goal here was, of course, raising funds to support SPARC in a sustained way and ensure we maintain SPARC as a premier after-school program. About 150 members of the boosters currently. We've raised over $120,000 since the formation. I'm proud to say we've got about $40,000 in our bank account. We work under the auspices of the Northeast High School Alumni Foundation. So thanking them for letting us go under their wing. And we're keeping SPARC going, but I'll talk about the future as we go forward. But here's the mission that almost didn't happen because of the money we raised. The SPARC 2014 mission that established a permanent habitat on the moon was able to be accomplished. So you can see they were actually using their shuttle simulator and the Apollo capsule for these missions. So again, a very innovative approach. These were scripted missions, and this one was written by Jeremy Cruz and a retired teacher, Jim Lynch, and the students would follow this out, and just an exciting experience for students, and all the other students were involved. The following year, we also did an open house with the boosters, and we had about 50 people come to that open house, including, again, this is Aaron Friedman. That's my brother, Jerry, who is again in SPARC in 67, 68. This is Mr. Montgomery, that's me, and a good friend of mine, Dr. Phil Usen, who is also in the medical team of SPARC. So, we kept SPARC going and really ensured that some good things happened. So SPARC, obviously it shifted focus. We've had a lot more efforts along with the missions, getting into robotics, making sure medical, first aid, CPR, and flights, doing both the simulated flights and learning how to fly drones. The engineering team also did Team America Rocketry Challenge, the computer divisions doing coding, Arduino, hacking challenges, and the administration team, they function to help support all those existing 5 divisions. The divisions have evolved. You can see from the initial ones that were created with Mr. Montgomery was there to where they are today. And I got to give a shout out to the robotics. These are the Northeast Robotics Development Specialists, the nerds as they call them. They've competed in the First Tech Challenge. They competed in the MATE, which is a Marine Advanced Technology Education. These are underwater robots. And they compete against schools that have a lot more resources, yet they do incredibly well. And you can see just an example of some of the trophies there. So all these things are about building skill sets for students. They're doing, computer assisted design. They're doing 3D printing. I went to one of the competitions in Hershey to see them in action, and they had a problem with one of their robots, and they were fixing this thing on the fly. These were really talented students. SPARC Medical doing great things in terms of its CPR training and first aid training. Those are just a couple examples of what's going on with SPARC. I want to just try to also take a look back we've had a number of astronauts who visited SPARC. As I mentioned, Scott Carpenter visited that very first flight back in 1964. But other astronauts have visited. Guy Bluford visited in 1983. He actually also visited my engineering school back in 1979. What an amazing guy. He's from Philadelphia as well. A cosmonaut visited, Yuri Malchenko, another space shuttle astronaut, Dr. Jim Magian, and the first astronaut I ever met, astronaut Paul Weitz. He flew on Skylab. He came to Northeast in 75 when I was a student to visit SPARC, and I still have the autograph that he signed, but I actually got to meet him and talk to him at a dinner. I sat at the same table and asked if he remembered his visit to Northeast, and he said he sure did. He eventually flew on the space shuttle as well. And then a really great visit, Chris Ferguson. If we have time, I could show the video. I don't know if we'll have time to do that. But he was made an honorary SPARC flight director in 2007, 2008, and recorded a video message to the students. And that's actually on our booster website if you'd like to see that. But he also made a return visit to SPARC in 2014, and there are the pictures. So if we had not saved SPARC at that time, this would never have even happened. So that's an exciting aspect of what we did. And I've also had the chance to talk to Chris Ferguson in person. He actually donated to the SPARC boosters, and he had some great ideas about where to take SPARC in the future. So what I was always impressed about SPARC and the students is the preparation they do for these flights. They put together these fabulous booklets about each flight. What's the mission related to the flight? They talk about the SPARC's history. They talk about the leadership of SPARC, who are the students involved, and so on. And they do a great job. And these are just a few examples of missions through the years. I'll just go back one more time there. So I had one from 2001, 2006, 2007, 2008, 2013, 2015. So they're doing some great stuff there. They've also done trips. They went to NASTAR, the centrifuge there. They visited the Goddard Space Flight Center. One of our boosters was an engineer at the Goddard Space Flight Center, and he actually invited them down, and they had a great visit with him there as well. One thing I should also talk about in terms of the visits, there is an engineer named Cy Liebergott. Cy Liebergott was a flight controller on the Apollo program, including Apollo 13. So he was there in mission control when the accident happened with Apollo 13. He was a graduate of the old Northeast High School and went on to become an engineer, but he actually also came back to visit SPARC at one point. So I think as we look to the future, we got to look at the changing face of STEM education. As I said, science, technology, engineering, and math. When you look at the overall goals from a U.S. government standpoint, increasing America's talent pool by improving the K-12 science, mathematics, and engineering education sounds like a reasonable goal, but also strengthening the skills of teachers. We talk about teachers and their superpower to impact and inspire, giving them additional resources so they can bring engineering and technology into their classrooms, and enlarging the pipeline of students prepared to enter college and graduate with STEM degrees. There's enormous investment in STEM today. Companies from all sectors have made STEM their #1 21st century corporate citizenship initiatives, doing things for the community. My organization, IEEE, and other technical professional societies are very heavily invested in STEM, universities as well. There are billions of dollars being spent annually to support STEM programs. And the result, there's some amazing programs out there. There are STEM camps. There are changes to the curriculum. There are now engineering courses at the high school level and other technical subjects, where coding is a big one, of course, to help students prepare. There are contests and competitions like the Science Olympiad, like the First Tech that I shared, and the MATE and so on. And there are new after-school programs. So it's changed the education paradigm that, I know space is in SPARC's roots, but we also have to be aware that we have to make sure SPARC students are prepared to compete with students from all over the country, because these programs are happening everywhere: coding, electronics, robotics, 3D printing, drones. So the students are learning these skills in high school, then being ready to, when they get to college, they're very well prepared. So SPARC, of course, needed to adapt to stay relevant for all this. Let me just highlight briefly before I talk about the future, some of our current SPARC students here. Ethan is in 12th grade. He's been part of the boat building competitions, and he's been flying drones. He actually earned his drone license and is on his way to study meteorology in college. Manar was working on the boat buildings, but she said SPARC has reigniting my love for science. Again, and finally, Christopher, who's also working on the boat project. Waterborne is another organization that SPARC has been working with on these boats, but he's participated in Science Olympiad and drones and flight simulators. And a really important aspect is how his actions affect the environment, being aware of that. So those are just a sample of 3 great students who are currently involved in SPARC. So let's close out as we talk about SPARC today and tomorrow. You can see some of the different groups that SPARC has. SPARC Engineering, very heavily involved in the competition, especially the Science Olympiad, where students can build anything. It could be a bridge, it could be a Wi-Fi antenna, it could be a device to measure weights of objects, all sorts of things. It's a national competition, but they have regional events as well. SPARC Aviation has really taken the drone training to the advanced level. Quite a few students have passed their FAA license requirements. And you can see there, we've invested in a flight simulator. So students can help also learn possibly about getting their commercial licenses and so on. All things to help them prepare. I've mentioned robotics. They have an incredible record of achievement, SPARC Medical, also again with CPR, first aid, but SPARC Environmental. This is a new group that was formed to help students reconnect with nature while exploring the ecosystem. So you see one of the boats they've built there. They've actually gone out and kayaked that themselves. They're studying the ecosystems, the riparian environments along the rivers and so on, and the life in the rivers and so on. So it's become a full-fledged STEAM camp in itself, STEAM meaning the A for arts. So a lot of great things happening in SPARC today. And it's 60 years of achievement. About 120 students participate annually in SPARC. Since its inception, and this is my approximation, around 6,000 students have been a part of SPARC operations. Many have entered STEM-related professions. I can tell you from my school, my high school, the director of the medical, Lou Dorlovsky, is an engineering professor. Another engineering team member, Larry Pearlstein, is an engineering professor. Another medical person, Harvey Madonic, is a emergency room physician. Julia Block, who is also in medical, she is a veterinarian. So it's really incredible, how SPARC has inspired us to go forward. SPARC students invest about 4 hours a week in their activities. Since its inception, and I'd love to be able to track all the flight histories, but there have been about at least 50 two-day flights and more than 75 flights in all in SPARC's 60 years of history. SPARC is transitioning to embrace this changing face of STEM. And one thing, as I mentioned before, they are always competitive in STEM competitions, even against schools that are more highly funded. So what's next? Well, the boosters, we're committed to ensuring SPARC has a sustainable source of funding for years to come. We want to invest in facilities and resources to ensure SPARC remains on the cutting edge of technology, because that's what students are expecting, this exposure to technology. We also want to commit to ensure all students, even those that maybe are not in SPARC, have access to these skills development and the personal growth that's going to make them competitive, either as they enter college or pursue other careers. And we want to continue programs that have great impact and add value, but we're exploring new ideas. Co-director Andy Adams and I, we've talked about maybe a makerspace. We've talked about AI. We've talked about other opportunities for space exploration and settlement to get us back to the space roots and other areas of technology. So I can tell you that the boosters are committed to this. We look for another 60 years of great activity within SPARC. A shout out to all the SPARC directors through the years. As I said, Andy is co-director with Dr. Danielle Parker. Obviously the pandemic impacted SPARC for several years. We're starting to get back on track with a lot of great activities. As I said, this year they're investing in all the different competitions and doing great work with drones, doing great work with medical, doing great work with the environment. So my hat's off to all of the SPARC directors who have helped keep SPARC at the forefront there. And what I've done here at the end, I had about 18 of our alumni share their stories. I am not going to go through these. I will be sending out the presentation to everybody, but you can get an idea of the different impacts SPARC has. I know Jeff is on the call tonight. He was in engineering. Stanley's on the call. And Stephen Rosen has been a big supporter. I actually was in school with my brother, Jerry. But if you get a chance when I send this out, you can take a look at the impact. Howard is on, Howard Weitz is on, Howard Snyder, they're both on tonight. I think Gerald's on. Just great stories to share about how SPARC impacted them as well. And so I encourage you to take a look at these as I send out the presentation. Again, just a great experience for all. So I personally want to thank all the past and current SPARC students because we as students made it happen. And to all the past SPARC directors and the dedicated faculty. a lot of dedicated faculty. When SPARC lost its funding, a lot of the faculty, after we started up again, volunteered their time to keep SPARC going. So incredibly dedicated. To all the SPARC boosters, together we help save SPARC. To the current faculty and members who support SPARC as well, they're doing such a great job. And the current co-directors, Dr. Danielle Parker and Mr. Andrew Adams. So thank you so much for that. If you would like a copy of the presentation, I'd be glad to send it out. Just send me an email at sparkboosters@gmail.com. A lot went into this, so hopefully it provided a great history of an amazing program. And just like Eleanor was talking about fundraising, again, the SPARC students are the innovators and problem solvers of the future. We want to help inspire that next generation. So I know a number of the people on the call today have already donated. So thank you so much in advance of that. But others, we welcome your donations. You can use the QR code there, or just go to the Northeast High School's Project SPARC Boosters website. And you can take a screenshot of this or use your camera at this point, and I'll leave that up for a few minutes there. But for me, it's been my reflection. SPARC had an enormous influence on my career, and again, as I said, Mr. Montgomery, Dr. Montgomery, was someone who touched the future, and being able to dedicate this to him is a great feeling. And hopefully you left today with understanding what SPARC is and the impact it's had. So I think with that, I'll just put that back there one more time. So if you want to take one last look to make a donation, we would welcome it. Any donation is important. And now I can stop sharing and open this up. I've got about 15 minutes before I have to go onto my other call. And I don't know if any of the other SPARC alumni want to say a few words, but I thank everybody who helped me get information to put this presentation together. So with that, Eleanor, I'll stop talking and see what other questions people have.
Yeah, this was phenomenal. This exceeded my expectations. This was great. And I just want to say a couple of things that sort of blew my mind in hearing about particularly the early days of SPARC. I could not believe the sophistication of the entire flight development process, the flight suits, all of that, the medical stuff. I couldn't believe that they were doing tilt tables. I did tilt table testing as part of my fellowship. So that also blew my mind. So that was really incredible. The one question I do have is, Robert Montgomery was there for 20 years until 82. Obviously he's still around, because I've seen some pictures that you showed this evening.
No, I should have said that. He passed away in 2015.
Oh, okay. All right.
Shortly,
I had wondered what he did after he left in 82. I had wondered.
He did go back and got his his doctorate in education, but he actually was a practicing engineer, working for a number of companies as an engineer after he left SPARC. And very involved, very deep religious, very involved in his church as well. So it was just a fabulous experience when he came back at the open house, because that was the first time I'd seen him in actually, I should say I became a CPR and first aid instructor when I was in college. Guess who my instructor was? Mr. Montgomery. So he's involved in so many different things, but it was just great to see him. And that was in May. And he passed away in November. I think it was November 11th, 2015 is when he passed away.
Oh, that's a shame. I do want to also mention that, and then I'll keep my mouth shut here. You mentioned about maker spaces, and something that triggered a thought in my mind. There's a guy, former NADC alumni, who works at Temple by the name of Woody Poulter, and he does a lot of mentoring with a lot of his engineering students, kind of along the line. This was reminding me a little bit of Project SPARC in some way, shape, or form. There might be some way of connecting Temple with Northeast High School, so I can send you his information after the call.
Yep, that would be great. We had a tour of Rutgers Makerspace. Dr. Parker and Mr. Adams all came up and we toured. Very impressive. And we actually started putting together a plan. The principal was all on board and then COVID hit.
Yeah.
So it might be something we continue to think about, but that would take a big, heavy investment. And I will say do this, all through some of the papers I've looked at, SPARC was, people were donating to SPARC all along. It wasn't just school money that they were getting. They were getting money from the Alumni Foundation. They were getting money from companies and so on. So that was a really important aspect of the program.
Yeah. Okay. Please, I'm going
Okay.
to open it up for questions for Bert. Any comments?
Any from our SPARC alumni?
Yeah, Bert, I wanted to mention one other thing, and you sort of touched on this, but it was really important. So I became involved in information technology, and I first learned to program in SPARC. So I never even realized I had wanted to do that until I experienced it. But one of the other practical things as an engineer, we learned a lot of hands-on construction and wiring and all the, the trade skills. And it wasn't just the technology, but just learning all those trades was immeasurable. And to this day, I still use many of those skills. So I don't want to overlook that, how important it was. We learned carpentry. I learned to do video.
Jeff, absolutely. Yeah. No, so it really, so is that what you did when you went to that type of thing, when you went to the State Department? I know you worked for the State Department for a while.
Yeah, I did. I still do some consulting for them. Yeah, I was information technology and telecommunications. I did a lot with a lot of different things. I've been in every aspect of IT, but my first experience was in SPARC. Just writing some programs but like I say, the more aside from being involved in technology, like for example, my college work study program, I worked audiovisual. I learned how to do videotaping in SPARC. And so that got me a job so that I could learn, earn money to go through college. So it's all those other skills that were just as important as, the primary STEM skills.
Absolutely. Yep. Thanks for sharing that, Jeff. Yeah.
Sure.
Anybody else? Any other of our SPARC alums who'd like to say a few words?
Bert, just to say, when I was in SPARC 69 and 70, I applied to be in medical, but I was rejected. I couldn't make it in. So as default, they put me in systems engineering to tell the group I've been a professor of cardiology medicine at Jefferson for the past almost 40 years. So I couldn't make it at Jefferson. But I really, really, really want to thank you for when SPARC was near its end, for stepping in there and saving this amazing legacy. Well done. Well done.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thanks, Bert. And I remember your mimeograph machine. Many of
yes, was my mother's.
I do remember that well. Many of SAR flyers.
My brother Steve is on. He probably remembers that as well. Anything else, everybody?
Yes, Stan Schwartz.
Hey, Stanley. Yes.
I just want to say what a remarkable job you've done. I mentioned my note that Mr. Montgomery was amazing. I know I got my travel bug from that original Greyhound 4,000 mile trip from there. And something hard to learn in the book is I learned, which carried me forward always, is to look forward, to always have some idea, go the next step. And that I'll attribute to Robert Montgomery and what you in Northeast have done for all these participants in this time is just remarkable. And I could be pleased, more appreciative of what you created tonight for us. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for sharing your story as well.
Were any of these missions recorded? I mean, you mentioned, I think Jeff mentioned about video.
Yeah, I don't know if they survived, but we did half-inch reel-to-reel video. And there might be, Dick, do you know if anything happened with those? I mean, I don't remember leaving the school with them. So they.
Andy, do you know of any? Are they stored anywhere?
No, Not to my knowledge, no.
Yeah.
I haven't come across anything when I was doing some digging.
Cleanup.
We didn't come across any film, no. And I
Well,
also
this was a 7-inch, half-inch video.
I could look again in the basement. I know that there's been some stuff that's been moved, so I will do a once over for sure.
Sure. This preceded Betamax and VHS.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
definitely
we
will
had
do
an advanced Betamax, I guess you could call it.
yeah.
Very good. Okay, anybody else? It's been a pleasure. It's been fun to put this presentation together. Andy sent me a bunch of boxes of old newspaper clippings, so I was going through them and scanning them. And I think ultimately I would love to write a definitive history of SPARC. I'm sure it would be a bestseller, right? Probably what, about 150 people would buy it.
Well,
But
yeah, I think it'd be great, Bert. You know, God, you could give this talk to, you know, even the you know, these school districts that have these annual, you know, teacher colloquiums. It might be interesting for them to hear this history.
right.
I think.
Glad to do it any time, and I'm glad you're recording it so others will be able to see it as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is Jerry Love. I was on with Stan Schwartz, like from 63 to 65. And I completely lost touch with SPARC. So this has been a fascinating discussion just to find out what happened to it. But what I'm struggling with is trying to remember what we were doing back then, because it just seemed so much more primitive. I mean, a lot of what I did was during the summers. It wasn't really on campus because I had access to computers that I was using then to do what I had to do. But I can't imagine how we would have had the time.
To do what?
You know, because we're all busy doing everything else.
Yes.
And
We
so
were in the SPARC wing every afternoon. You know,
well, we didn't have a
and
SPARC wing then, I think.
yeah.
Yeah, we were there. I graduated in 77 with Bert. We were there pretty much every single day. We had 7th period lunch, so we started at 2 in the afternoon and we were there till 4 or 5 o'clock every day doing something.
Yeah.
And like I said, we were building the capsule for, I guess, flight 27. So that's why I'm saying our experience is that we had a lot of hands-on work learning how to use, you know, for example, we had to use the punch press to punch holes for the control boards to mount the relays and lights and switches. So we learned how to use, you know, some equipment that we would never have an experience with anywhere else.
Yep.
And pulling cable and
I remember doing that. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, what I said before we started this conversation, I shared the fact that when we first went, I hesitate to call it live. We had the newspapers, everybody coming to the auditorium to film our starting off, you know, with the capsule and the astronauts going in, but we didn't get the thing finished in time. So there were a bunch of lights and switches in the control panel, like for one half of the capsule, the other half was still open, and we never connected the stuff. So what we did, a few of us were in the back room flipping switches to give the impression that this was all working, you know, just because we had the news media there at that point.
I wonder if
Delighted to hear that that's not the way it continued.
Sometimes.
Right? Yeah,
well, there was a skit they did of Robert Montgomery, and I recall this, Bert, where he was maniacal and was yelling lights and buttons. And do you remember that?
Oh, it's I
wonder if it started back in the very beginning.
I think that's what happened to us. That wasn't a skip.
Yeah. And it became a skit that was on. And I got in trouble for imitating him many times, and he would slink up behind me, realizing I'm making, you know, just having fun and give me the evil eye. It's pretty fun days.
Absolutely. Well,
I was in SPARC.
Everybody.
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Howard.
Thanks so much, Bert and Eleanor for arranging. I was just going to say that I was in SPARC 72 to 74, so that was the in-between years when we weren't doing any space simulations or flight simulations at all. But SPARC was really geared toward medical, which is what I was in, and we did. I don't know if it was the first, but probably one of the first. We called it the bed rest study, the deconditioning and recovery projects. And we basically, you know, as you said, turned the medical room was it was, well, the SPARC, the half of the SPARC wing, half of the SPARC wing was for classrooms for the aerospace mining program, and the other side of the hallway was all SPARC. So we had the medical wing was where our astronauts were, our test subjects who were at absolute complete bed rest, as you said. They had to use bedpans and everything, they could roll over on their side and from one side to the other, but it had to be completely horizontal. But we turned our medical unit, since we staffed it 24 hours a day for the duration of the program. I can't remember, it was 7 days or 10 days or whatever. But we had, our medical group was operating in shifts, and we slept in the control room. The control room was our dorm, basically. And we were in cots there, and, we were rotating 8-hour shifts, three 8-hour shifts a day. And it was like such an incredible experience as an introduction. For me, I eventually, I went to medical school, and, but that, an introduction to sort of day-to-day practice, or, what it's like to be in a hospital setting, essentially.
You shared that story. That's amazing. I know we didn't do any of that as we prepared for our flights. Like I said, we did the sensory deprivation, but that was about it in terms of, and of course the tilt table tests and things like that. I'm sorry, everybody. I think I have to end because I have to get on my other call.
No, your
So,
time, this was very generous of your time.
Yep.
And this was great. I'm so glad that we had a chance to make this happen.
A lot of fun. Yes. Thank you, Eleanor, for inviting us to talk about SPARC, and thanks again to everybody for joining us. And
Thanks, Bert.
yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for putting it together.
Right. So thank you all, and please join us next month for our next webinar about this time next month in May. But
Sounds
again,
good.
great program this evening, and very, very inspiring. So I'm really glad we finally made this happen.
Yep. And just one comment there about Michael Sion, the current robotics coach, made a comment there about Temple University robotics professor visiting, and so great. It's great to get all the expertise you can. But again, amazing students. That makes it fun. So everybody, wishing you a good night.
Good night.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, Eleanor.
Bye-bye.